Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we have another Gun Gripe episode for you, and we are going to be getting into the weeds on the summary of the proposed rule 2021 R05, and that is the ATF is basically proposing that they're going to change the definition of a frame or receiver and some other factors on identification of firearms and things like that. We are going to get into the weeds on this and talk about it a little bit more. I would like to thank our friends at Sonoran Desert Institute for supporting Gun Gripes. They are a great group of people with some awesome distance learning programs in the firearms technology realm. If you want to learn how to be a gunsmith for a living, they are a great group of people to look into. They accept all kind of awesome financial aid if you're a former military. So get that stuff working for you. Get in there and get you some education and get out there and make a living in the gun industry. Okay, so we're going to get into this a little bit, and there's been some articles floating around and some things going on, and we're going to try our best to articulate this in a way that maybe people can understand it. It primarily has to do with 80% firearms or unfinished firearms frames and parts kits and things of that nature. In case you guys don't know, under current law, under the GCA, an 80% frame that's unfinished is not considered a firearm under current law. So the idea is that people will buy the 80% frame, complete it, which the 80% frame does not require any kind of a background check. That goes right to your front door. You complete the frame, you assemble the gun, and you have a firearm. Of course, parts such as uppers, barrels, upper receivers, bolts, gas system components, especially in the AR-15 series of rifles, are not regulated and can go straight to your front door, which is completely normal. Under current law and what people have always understood, it is perfectly legal and acceptable, undertaking for a person to make their own firearm. People have been doing it for years. There are currently no type of marking requirements on firearms. So if you make your own gun, you're not even required to mark it. It doesn't have to have a unique identification number or serial number or anything. The unwritten rule has always been that people are encouraged to mark their own guns for their own records keeping and things like that. But under current law, you're not required to even mark your own firearm if you don't want to. So this goes into the weeds in a lot of different ways, right? The reason that the ATF is proposing this is because there's some perceived concern or imaginary concern that there are tons of these ghost guns. You keep seeing this term thrown around, ghost gun, that there are these unregistered and homemade guns floating around being used in crimes, and that they want to stop the use of those given firearms in crimes. Well, for one, criminals don't obey the law, so that's not going to matter what law you pass. They're going to find some way around it anyway. And two, there's really no confirmed data that we've been able to find anywhere that shows that there's actual data that backs up their claims that guns of this type are used in an extraordinary number of different crimes. Now, there is a field where it'll say like unmarked firearms or whatever, but that could come into unserialized. But that could come into a lot of different things. That could be a person that removed the serial numbers off of a factory gun. That could be a pre-68 that never had serial numbers to begin with. All right, it could be a stolen firearm. So there's a lot of other things that could go into that figure other than what they're claiming it is. So the government in general has this way of saying the sky's falling, okay, but without anything to really back it up. Well, right now there's this comment period that's open, and for 90 days, once it's in the Federal Register, they are going to wind up, taking a comment period for 90 days. You guys might remember on the whole brace issue back in December, people were encouraged to send a comment or a letter in to Regina Lombardo, which is the acting director of the ATF, and express their concern over why pistol braces are not a big deal. And you notice they dropped the issue, they removed the comments and the entire statement from the registry, and then it just sort of went away. Okay, so here we are now sitting on another comment period. So what do you think overall, Chad?
So I want to go back to a couple of things you mentioned early on, just so folks have a better understanding of things. All right, in 1968, we had the Gun Control Act, right? And at the time, the reasoning behind a lot of this, you can read, all right, in the actual rule. or the proposed rule, all right? But it's like 115 pages, all right? It's not light reading. It's a lot of material. And they do go into pretty good detail, but I want to touch on a couple of things, though. Back in 68, the ATF argues that the commonly available firearms that were on the market at that time were like revolvers, bolt actions, single-shot rifles, where the actual receiver, that housed many of the fire control components, and the other components that are necessary for the operation of that firearm were housed. All right, so it was very easy to distinguish that. All right, but then you had the AR-15 come onto the civilian market more and more and more, and now it is literally the most popular platform in the United States. All right, there are more of those in circulation than is even fathomable. Okay, and the ATF was faced with a quandary, like what part is the firearm? For many, many years, the lower receiver has been determined to be the firearm, okay? And that's where those 80%, receivers come into play, because they are solid in the area that houses the fire control component. So therefore, it is not a firearm, like Eric mentioned, all right? What this rule seeks to clarify, okay, is when does a firearm's 80% or like an 80% receiver that can be turned into a personal made firearm, when is it considered a firearm? All right, and the kits that are out there, okay, they have like, say, a Glock kit like this 80% right here. All right, you get a frame that is incomplete, but you get all the other necessary components to complete that firearm at home. All right, these have been very popular over the years, but the ATF is wanting to classify that as a Title I firearm, which would require you purchasing an 80% kit through a dealer and filling out a 4473. That's one of the ultimate goals of this proposed rule. All right, now, one thing that I could not find in this, and the FPC and other organizations are going through it like tooth and nail, okay? But this is a 3D printed Glock loader, all right? This is from Print Your 2A. All right, you can download these files for free. And if you've got a 3D printer at home, you can print your Glock frame and you can make a personal made firearm at home. There is no rule in here or clarification on whether or not you have to serialize this at home. Okay, I cannot find that. That is not in this rule, not to my knowledge. All right, so you still don't have to serialize these at home. That is not part of this rule. But if a dealer, say you put this together and then one day you decide, hey, I'm going to pawn this or I'm going to sell it. You sell it to a licensed dealer, they then are required to serialize this item per this rule, okay? And then, therefore, it is marked and it is easily traceable at that point. The biggest thing with this whole crap is that the ATF wants to be able to have a line on every single firearm out there. And like Eric mentioned, the data that they clarify in this, where they're pulling their statistics and everything from, there is no clear indication of how many homemade firearms, okay, from lawful citizens, all right, are winding up in this pool of unserialized items.
Or, where they even came from in the first place, yes. Right? There are a lot of situations where I've read in certain articles and things that I've found all over the place, I've read situations where they say that guns that they're recovering are getting snuck over the border. They're coming from, out of the country and everything like that. Black market
sales.
So that's still black market. That's still not on the up no matter what, right? I think that the issue is they're chasing this really crazy monster by the tail that doesn't even represent like 99% of average Americans, right? Yep. The guy that buys an 80% AR or Glock frame and completes it on his own, more than likely is probably somebody that already owns a ton of guns anyway. There's not people that are buying these just to like skirt the law or to try to, find some outlandish way to somehow cheat the system. I think that not to say that that's not happening, but the amount of people that are actually using it for that purpose are so small compared to the people that lawfully do this, that it unfairly places very unreasonable restrictions on average people's Second Amendment rights. And then I have an issue too, all right, as a gun dealer. Now you have to sort of operate in a semi-law enforcement capacity. You've got to be able to have the determination to go, well, this is legally this or this is legally that. So now you're asking all these FFLs all around the country to basically play lawyer for you. And it's for your benefit, not for anyone's benefit. Definitely not for the FFL's benefit, because it's more paperwork and more headache and more scrutiny that they're under. All right, if they make the wrong decision about what walked in their front door they decided to buy and or sell, that opens them up to more scrutiny. So that's something that most FFLs certainly don't want: more scrutiny, more headache, more paperwork. And then 3, you're infringing on the citizens' rights to produce their own firearm. This doesn't go just to like lowers and 80% and things like that. They're also considering, they want to propose the idea that if you buy a parts kit, that the parts kit from a holistic standpoint must be, transferred on a 4473. Well, parts like non-essential, non-serialized parts, they're not serialized, right? How many AR uppers have you ever ran into that are actually serialized? They're not. It's not a serialized component, and it's never been. So let's say they change the rule, all right, and they say, well, now an AR upper is considered a firearm, and if you buy it and have it, you have to have it transferred into your FFL. All right. What about the millions with an M, millions of those components that are out there on the open market and have been circulating on the open market since as long as that has been a concept, right? Even back in the days of Bannerman's, way back around the turn of the century, civilians were selling, surplus military hardware, cannons, powder, TNT, dynamite. Yep. They were selling bins of rifles and barrels and actions, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, definitely millions of different barrels and components and parts kits and random stuff. So the idea is that train left a long time ago, and there's no bringing it back. You're not going to put the train in reverse and go back in time and just change all this overnight. And I think that they're applying some blanket statement to something that, okay, one, they're assuming that if someone has an unserialized AR upper, that they're going to waltz into a gun store and go, oh, I want to sell this. Oh, I didn't know, so we have to serialize it? Well, let's serialize it. So do you think for 1 second that the people with unserialized uppers and components and barrels and slides and things of that nature are going to go waltz in and have it numbered? No, they're not going to do that. 2, criminals aren't going to set foot near a gun store anyway. If they're not able to buy a firearm, they're going to go buy it off the street. And yes, they buy Title I firearms, and they don't buy Title I firearms that get transferred on a 4473 anyway. Now, I'm not saying they don't. They do. But they buy crap that's brought in from overseas, and they buy all kind of illegal stuff. Right. I mean, on the black market, these people can buy RPGs and grenades and explosives. I mean,
nuclear weapons.
I mean, there's all kind of crap. So you can't stop evil people from doing bad things, and you can't assume that just because you've created this fantasy land of registration, which essentially is registration, the ATF and the government is not supposed to maintain a registry on civilians. There's no such thing as a registry. They're not supposed to catalog 4473s. They're not supposed to keep electronic copies of 4473s. Those 4473s are to trace the firearm from when it was produced to whoever hands it wound up in. And if you go through the normal channels and go through a gun store and buy a Title I gun, that is the only thing that form is meant to be. Because if that firearm winds up being used in a crime, then they can go, all right, who did the 4470? What they do, just in case you don't know the process, they go to the manufacturer. They go, all right, we found a Smith on a dead body, whatever, right? They go back, and I hate to use Smith & Wesson, but they go to Smith & Wesson, and they say, all right, here's this revolver. Here's the serial number. When did you make it? Oh, well, we made it on this date. They looked through their books. We transferred it so-and-so. All right, whatever distributor, all right? Then the distributor goes, well, we transferred it to Joe Blow's pawn shop over in blah, blah, blah. And then they go to Joe Blow's pawn shop, and Joe's Blow pawn shop says, I sold it to Terry Brown here. And then they go to Terry Brown, and Terry Brown goes, no, you know what I mean? So they can trace it from when it was made to where it wound up. But it's not to maintain a registry, right? You look at Canada's long gun registry, they dropped it quick because they didn't realize how expensive and arduous of a process it was to maintain a long gun registry. For one, they're not supposed to be maintaining a registry. Some people think they are. They're going in and keeping copies of these 4473s to have some sort of a registry. But then the other issue is, not only do you add that they're not supposed to keep a registry, but now you're creating this regulatory burden that now these gun dealers have to have this whole other mountain of things that they have to keep up with, and that opens them up to extra scrutiny. Oh, well, you shouldn't have transferred this, but you did anyway. And now you're asking FFLs to work essentially in like some form of a law enforcement capacity at that point, because you're basically having to play, the gun nanny.
Let's put on the brakes. I hope y'all got your popcorn. All right, look. Dude, this is a lot of information, and there's
It
a
is.
lot of feeling. More fearing in this.
Sweet
Now, look,
rolls,
The
coffee.
real Terry Brown is out there going, "Don't come to my house." Ah!
Well,
Anyways,
all
right, Joe, look,
entities in this gun gripe are
fictitious.
fictional.
any
Fictitious.
let's see, any likeness to a real person is strictly coincidental. All right.
Sorry, Terry. There's probably
right,
a bunch
look.
of Terry Browns like, no.
Oh no, don't come to our house. All right, look. So under the GCA, from what I understand, all right, the kind of unwritten rule is 3 components. All right, something has to house 3 components. This proposed rule wants to change that to like this is the wording here. All right, under the proposed rule, a frame or receiver is an externally visible housing or holding structure for 1 or more fire control components. 1 or more. Not 3, 1 or more. All right, that's where we get into the slide. All right, the slide holds the barrel, the striker, all right, or in a hammer-fired firearm, okay, it contains, the firing pin and everything like that. The hammer's on the lower portion, all right. So this could conceivably be a firearm. That's what we're referring to. This, if this proposed rule goes into the Federal Register and everything, and it becomes the kind of rule of or law of the land for the most part, this becomes a firearm under this proposed rule as we are reading it right now. A fire control component is one necessary for the firearm to initiate, complete, or continue the firing sequence, including but not limited to any of the following: hammer, bolt carrier, breech block, cylinder, trigger mechanism, firing pin, striker, or slide rails. Slide rails.
Okay.
Slide rails. Oh, wait. Look. All right.
Go.
I have to go back in time because I have to cover things that you talked about. All right. Talking about a regulatory burden on dealers, okay? Gunsmiths would have to be licensed, from what I understand in this rule, they would have to be licensed like separately in order to mark personal made firearms that come into their inventory. They couldn't just mark it. But like the ATF is going to make an exception for gunsmiths who have a special gunsmithing FFL to mark firearms. Typically, when you mark firearms, you're a manufacturer, okay? You're an 07, not a gunsmith FFL, or not an 02, not an 01, all right? Also, when Eric was mentioning, all right, the keeping of 4473s, currently, under the law of the land right now, if you are a FFL holder and you transfer firearms to non-licensees on 4473s, those records have to be kept 20 years. This proposed rule changes that time that you have to keep those forms
Forever.
until you give up your license. So for the life of your license, you have to keep those forms. But it's just about control, and that's the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
Is it's about more and more control. And with the advent, like we said, all right, 3D printers. Look, this is a hot topic, okay? Because this is a blatant attack on a constitutional right, okay? The only reason this is a thing is because of stuff like this. All right, and
Right.
because the advent of modern technology and the low cost of things like 3D printers and being able to print your own frames that in a lot of cases will last and last and last, and they work quite well. The ATF wants to know about all these guns. I mean, short of registration, the ATF wants to know about all these guns out there.
They kind of contradict themselves quite a bit right here. So I'm just going to read this, okay? Weapons parts kits with partially complete frames or receivers and containing the necessary parts that may be readily assembled, completed, converted, or restored to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive or firearms, for which each frame or receiver of the weapon could need to be marked. A weapon, including a weapons parts kit, in which each frame or receiver of the weapon or within such kit is destroyed, is not considered a firearm. That's 2 totally different things. That's 2 totally different things. Well, and what they're talking about is machine gun parts kits. So, like, the way they used to do it, and this is getting down a completely different rabbit hole, okay? So, like, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but, like, the way that you used to be able to import parts kits is they could saw cut them in certain areas and import it so you could still be able to use the parts to actually produce, you know, a clone of that gun, give the semi-auto receiver. So, like, if a gun couldn't be imported as a machine gun, because they don't allow that, which is dumb, they should, but the fact a civilian can't just buy a new machine gun, right? So if a person wants to, like the SETMELs that are out there right now, if a person wants to build a semi-auto clone of a SETMEL, well, the SETMEL is a machine gun. So you can't build it as a full auto. They have to bring in the parts kits. Well, in the old days, they would just saw cut them in certain locations, and that way all you'd have to do is disassemble the parts, buy a receiver, all right, on a Title I, whatever, do a 4473 and buy a Nodak Spud receiver, or bend your own and mark it or whatever, and then disassemble and demill the parts, what we call demilling, and then make the gun with those parts. You used to be able to do that. And then the ATF was like, no, we don't want you to do that anymore. And then they changed the requirements to where the parts kits have to be torch cut, and you have to torch cut the barrels. Oh, and you got to torch cut, certain distance from the front of the gun, the back of the gun. They got to be a certain angle. They've got to go through this part, that part. And then they basically make it to where, okay, you destroyed the parts kit so bad that you just about can't do anything with it. It's pointless at that point. So that's what they're referring to when they say a firearms parts kit that has been destroyed in such a way that it's not considered a firearm. Yeah, because the barrel is torch cut in half, and the receiver is cut in 5 different places with a really rough acetylene torch that puts these big, ugly, gnarly welds, and it takes a master machinist to reassemble it and make it. And then you got to make a barrel.
Yeah, and usually you got to buy like 2 or 3
You got to have 2 parts to make one gun, and you got to have a competent gunsmith that knows how to actually make a barrel for a given gun.
So look, just to kind of recap, okay? We know for sure that the ATF is going after 80% parts kits, okay? 80% kits, like buy, build, shoot type kits, okay? This is what Polymer 80 got rated for a while back, or these buy, build, shoot kits. And that's sort of what started all this mess down this rabbit hole, okay? But we know for sure that they want to go after 80% kits. All right, so it's basically hinging on the definition of whether it may readily be completed. What is the definition of readily? I mean, at what point down the line do we say that a block of aluminum, okay, a block of 7075 or 6061, at what point do we say that's a 0% firearms receiver and it has to be serialized before it's even milled out? And then, wait a minute, so in the milling process and completing that receiver, you're removing the serial number. Oh, you can't do that because that's a federal crime. I mean, where do we want to end up at? Like, I mean, we can just keep going down and deeper and deeper.
We know where they want to end up at. But I mean, so what? You're going to go to the hardware store and you can't buy a sack of boot grommets anymore? You can't buy some tubing?
Yep.
You can't make wipes? I mean, come on.
Now look, I want to talk about this because it's important for those of you who are still here. All right, this is an important thing. All right, Cody Wilson. All right, everybody should know who Cody Wilson is. All right, so Cody Wilson, all right, recently reached out to a company called Markforged. All right, and they make 3D printers. They make some awesome 3D printers. They make metal 3D printers that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? But they advertised a brand new 3D printer that prints 100% carbon fiber. And their filament, if you guys are into 3D printing at all, okay, this is really cool. Their carbon fiber is advertised to be 30% stronger than 6061 aluminum. All right, and Cody Wilson saw this and is like, wow, I can use this to make my 3D printed firearms.
Which is a perfectly legal
thing, all right? Markforged canceled his order because they determined that they do not want their machines being used to make firearms. Who are you to say, oh, well, we're going to sell you this, we're going to let you buy this, but you can't do this with it because we don't like that. If you sell a product, once that product is the personal property of your customer, they can do whatever they so desire with it. If a guy goes to a car dealership and he buys a car and his sole purpose is to go and run through a crowd of people, well, the dealership didn't have any control of that. It's like, hey, you can't buy this if you're going to do this.
It's not the manufacturer's fault.
All right,
and it's not the car dealer's fault to go, well, that person seemed a little off, but you know what? He's got a pocket full of money. I mean,
it may be a bad comparison or a bad example, but I'm just saying that's the extreme nature of this concept. But Cody put out a bounty for anybody. It's like, if anybody can get me one of these, I will pay you X number of dollars, like well over what the thing costs. And from what I understand, he has one in his possession and he's been tinkering around with it, which I'm really curious to see what comes out of that whole deal. But, you know, like I said, the technology is advancing so quick with like things like 3D printing, and it makes producing your own firearms at home exponentially easier and exponentially more available to more people. And that is what the powers that be hate the most. They do not want the people to be in power. They do not want the people to be in control. They want to be in control. So if you don't take anything else from this video, this is a legitimate gripe. Know that the powers that be in the federal government do not want you having that power.
No.
At all.
They don't like you being able to be self-sufficient. They certainly don't want you to be able to protect yourself. They want you to have to rely on their law enforcement.
Yep.
Now look, I'm not going to say that law enforcement doesn't serve a critical role in our society in certain cases. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole there. I'm just not, right? But to apply a blanket statement that, all right, screw law enforcement, or yay, I'm pro-law enforcement, blue line. No, like that's a terrible thing to just apply such a blanket statement. But they want you to have to rely on Mama Bear 110% for every tiny little thing. They want you to call the police for every little thing, because the more phone calls they get, the more police they have to hire, the more police they have, the more laws they can pass and enforce. It's all about laws. They want to pass more and more and more laws, more and more restrictions, so that people get so emotionally numb that they just don't even care anymore about trying to be free, because all they know is control. And you've got generations of people that are going to grow up in a society that just tell you, well, keep your head down and don't question authority, don't question the rules, don't question the laws. No, we should question it, right? And I think that when we look at this type of a thing, it is pretty scary, because they don't want to give up any form of control. They don't want you being self-sufficient. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't want you questioning the narrative. And they ultimately want all the power. And if they see some little way to achieve that, they're going to take that route in any way they see possible. So I'll just end by saying this, and I know we're going to kind of wrap this video up a little bit.
One more thing that's very minor.
Right. So, he's going to bring up one more thing, but I'll just end my part by saying that I think that the best thing that our government could do, if they just don't want people to look, shut up about it. Quit talking about it. Quit trying to infringe on people's rights. Quit trying to pass laws. Quit being so vocal about it, and people will quit buying it. You know, but the minute that these anti-gun politicians open their mouth, what happens? Record gun sales, ammo shortages. So do you really think that at this point in the game, right, that you made the right decision by saying, well, we're going to do this? Well, that train's already left. That train's already left. There are no 80% in stock. There are no barrels and uppers and crap in stock. Maybe sometimes, but you're not finding any of that stuff. People are buying it up because you're talking about it. Shut up. Quit freaking talking about it. Quit mentioning it. Focus on something that people actually want and care about, and stop talking about gun control. And guess what? People will quit buying guns. People will quit making guns. But when you tell someone you can't do that, what do? They do it. The American populace at large, in general, they're just like kids. When you tell your kids, don't touch the hot stove, what do? They put both hands on the hot stove.
I just feel like I need to touch it.
Right. When you tell them, you can't eat those sweets, they're bad for you, what do? When you go to bed, they sneak down to the kitchen and they eat the sweets.
They hide under the table.
You can't tell people that they can't do something. Americans are going to do what you tell them not to do.
We have a history of that.
We have a history of that. It's known. It's not a mystery. Like, people know, like, that's what we do. So if you want people to not buy guns, stop freaking talking about it.
We are quite a defiant people.
Yes.
All right, look.
So you want to cover one more thing?
Yeah, this is one more thing. This is sort of minor for just normal people out there, okay? If you're not a dealer, or a manufacturer or whatever, this doesn't really apply to you, but they're changing the marketing requirements. So no longer is there going to be the name of the business and then just like a model and then caliber or whatever the item in question, and then just a serial number of their choosing, like serial number, I don't know, ABC/123. Now, manufacturers are going to be required to put the first 3 and the last 5 of their FFL, okay, their actual FFL license number on every item, from what I read here. All right, this isn't just marking requirements. This says marking requirements for firearms other than personal-made firearms. So this is everything that's on the market moving forward after this rule is supposedly maybe put into play. But that's just more regulatory burden, okay? More chance for some, FFL to screw things up and be audited and have their license revoked.
Absolutely what I was thinking.
Making things inherently more complex for manufacturers and dealers to just operate. And that's one of the ultimate goals, too, is to make it so burdensome on a regulatory level that people just say, you know what?
It ain't worth it.
I ain't going to get into it.
That's a really, really good point that you made there, and I agree completely. I think that they want to place such heavy burden on the manufacturers and on the license holders that they're just like, you know what, all this red tape, screw it, we're not doing it anymore, it's not worth it, and trust me, they want to create an environment where people are so frustrated trying to exercise their rights that they simply won't do it. Just like I mentioned earlier. They want the nanny state. They want to be in control. They want to hold little puppet strings and tell you how to live your life and what to think and what to do and what your opinion should be.
Yeah.
And we see that in mainstream media and social media, there's all this suggestive advertising, suggestive blue checks on Twitter and blue checks on Instagram and all these blue checks on Facebook that post all this stuff, and it gets millions and millions and millions of hits and follows, and you're being trained, right? You're being mentally trained to go, well, this person with all these followers, well, they obviously are the people that everyone follows and listens to, but it's not really reality, right? They're propped up. They're put there for a reason. They're useful to them because they toe the narrative and they toe the line and they say exactly what they want them to say. So, of course, their little puppet that's dancing just like they want them to dance. They're going to have the millions of followers because they want to trick people into thinking that, oh, well, because this person's really popular, I should listen to what they say in regards to whatever social issue or whatever it may be. When in reality, the people that are being listened to the most are folks like us that are actually grounded in reality and understand the true nature of what they're trying to do with these things. This proposal is just scratching the surface, right? You give them this and you go, yeah, that doesn't seem so bad. A law-abiding citizen shouldn't have a problem just registering their guns or filling out a 4473 for a firing pin. I know we cleared up that they don't do that, but maybe that will be the case.
Hey.
Oh, you have an unregistered, unserialized firing pin. Well, you go to, butt rape prison for the rest of your life. Like, I guess the law is goofy. Like, gosh, you're a bad boy. Oh, gosh.
The thing with the blue checks, all right, and one thing that happened recently was a blue check kind of, didn't really make a death threat, but wished death upon Elon Musk. All right, and that blue check is still out there just posting away. So, where's the standard? I mean, those people are not.
If I did that, I'd be under Leavenworth.
So, that's the thing. There's no consistency with that standard that's out there. Like, oh, if we say something like that, then we get booted off the platform. But if a popular blue check that's, let's just say it, a leftist, leaning person, who kind of relates more to the company's mantra itself, or whatever the case might be, or their political leanings, they get a pass. Okay,
right.
They can say stuff like that and get away with it, and then they can redact and say, "Oh, I was sorry about that." Oh, well,
But the point is, folks are erroneously led to believe that the views and passions of these blue checks and all these talking heads within the media and within social media are the voice of people, right? So when they say, Americans want more gun control.
Really?
Like, people think that just because they're saying that and some algorithm in Twitter boosts them and gets them a whole bunch of, bots that are giving them views. I mean, think about it. Whoever could go in on the back end and go, we're going to disable dislikes. Or, we're just going to bump this view count up. We're going to bump these likes up. We're going to bump this metric up. We're going to make them show up everywhere through this back-end algorithm. So there's all these things that they can do that, how do you know they're being honest about the people that actually support that position? But because you're being trained to go, well, this blue check here that's talking about gun control has got 59,000 likes and 500,000 reshares and 20 million views on this piece of content. So that must really be what people think because he's really popular. And look, all these people support him. And then it's what, Chinese bots? I mean, come on. I hate to wear the tinfoil hat, but
Look,
Don't assume that just because all the famous people say that you should think a certain way about a given subject, be it gun control or be it this COVID stuff or whatever, right? I don't care what the position might be, abortion or religion or anything, whatever the social issue may be to you. Think for yourself and gather your own facts and look at yourself in the mirror and go, do I really believe this? Or do I believe it just because some person that I like said it? Don't fall into that trap, dang it. Think for yourself.
Look.
Think as a person.
the more you think for yourself, the more you'll want to start stockpiling for it. All right. I have. The older I get, the more I look at the world and I say, boy, that just doesn't seem right. And then you look into it, you're like, all right, well, maybe all these crazies that I thought were loony bins, 20 years ago are right. And
Not so
everyone else is
crazy.
wrong.
Not so crazy anymore. Well, I know that we really dove into the weeds on this gun gripe, but I really appreciate you sticking around if you stayed here till the end. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. Make sure that you go and leave a comment in the Federal Register once the public comment period opens up on the website. Right now, it's not in the register. You can't submit a comment digitally. You can mail in comments, however, if you want at this point. Let's see, today is May 11th, and it is noon 35. As of right now, in the now, the digital comment period is not open, but make sure you follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and I will be sure that once that comment period is open, I will share all of the links and everything so you can go leave your comment to the ATF on this. And make sure you're checking out a lot of the other pro-gun news channels and things like that, because I will be releasing my comment in a form of an article, probably on T-Tag and a few other places. So expect that. Anytime there's a proposed rule change, I like to publish my letter publicly so people can understand where I'm coming from. And I'll read this document in super fine-tooth comb detail, and I will articulate my points, hopefully better than what I did here. But I will go through and I will publish my letter, so stay tuned for that.
Don't worry, I'll proofread it for you.
That's
Randy
right,
will
yeah.
too.
Yeah, I have to get a little grammar help and spelling and stuff because, I'm just a dumb redneck. I don't know anything, so, Anyway, what do I know? Have a good day. We really appreciate you watching, and many more gun gripes on the way. We've got a ton of content on the way. Make sure you're checking it out. We'll see you soon.
Bye, guys. Let's go make a gun.